Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Follow Brand Podcast. This is Grant McGaw. I am in the wintry world of Omaha, Nebraska today. You know, I'm a Florida boy, but I've come back home. It's been 30 some odd years, and I learned how to drive in the snow. Again, it's just like swimming. It's just riding the bike. It just comes back to you naturally. So I'm getting back to this wintry world. Yes, I will be in St. Croix pretty soon as well, and I'll be in Miami as always. But today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, that is personal branding. And I couldn't think of anyone else to really have this discussion with as we begin to transition out of 2025 into 2026. People start thinking about, what am I going to do different? What's going on in my career? What's going on in my business? What's going on with me personally? So we're going to talk about personal branding with Jen Dalton. So, Jen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for that introduction. I was actually born in Tampa, Florida, so I am a Floridian up in DC. So I went north. So I like the whole St. Croix plan you have. I am thrilled to be here. I think you're spot on. The timing is such a great opportunity for people to step back and think about who were they this year? How do they want to adjust or evolve that going into next year? So I'm excited to talk about it with you.
Yeah, let's unpack that. A lot of people, they have personal branding. So a lot of times they get confused a little bit with business branding, how to brand your business. But then personal branding is a little bit different. I want to get from you, how do you define personal branding from your perspective and your core value around that?
That's a great question. I always tell my clients two things. I tell them, one, telepathy is not a strategy, right? If we want people to know who we are, we have to communicate it. And number two is that personal branding is not personal bragging. So I'm a big believer that we have to be very clear on how do we bring value to whether it's friends, family, the workplace, what are our values? What's our why? And really digging deep into that. And so my tagline for my company, Brand Mirror, is reflect, stand out. And it is this idea of self reflection to know who you are, and that can help you stand out to the right audiences.
I love that. I love that. You're right in time, or I would say aligned in how I look at personal branding. I developed it into a framework I call the BRAVE framework, because I think you got to be brave. You got to step out. It's almost like, people think about public speaking. You're like, oh my
Oh, yes.
no one likes to, a lot of people don't like to, speak publicly. And I think a lot of that is because you're just not prepared. If you know what you're talking about, you can
100%.
talk at any point in time. Like, oh, I love talking about this stuff. I can't believe they're talking about this. I want to talk about it, right? But if you start talking about something you don't know that much about, you get uncomfortable. That's that uncomfortable feeling that you get. I think when you think about personal branding, this is my perspective, is that when you understand, and I put it into a framework called BRAVE, which is your identity, brand identity, right? You got to get into and do some research around what you're talking about. Are you authentic in your brand? Can you make it visible? And can you execute on that, repeatedly, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, and it has to be a goal, right? What is your purpose? There's got to be a purpose when you're putting it out there, especially in the digital world, as well as even in person. So, from your perspective, I want to know this because I always say, what's your origin story? What got Jen interested in personal branding?
Mm. So I grew up in an entrepreneurial household. My parents were entrepreneurs, my grandparents were entrepreneurs. And so although I spent 10 years in the corporate space working on branding, marketing, product development, I really wanted on my 10th anniversary, I also had my second son. And I was like, this is a moment where I need to pause and think about what do I want to do next for the next 10 years. And so for me, I was thinking that through for myself. And when I went back to Georgetown to get my executive MBA, I went back with the sole purpose of I know I want to start my own venture. I know I want it to be branding because I love storytelling. I love the blend of business strategy with brand strategy. And what I discovered is that my classmates were so amazing. And yet we had all just spent a lot of money to go back to grad school. We needed to be able to tell our story. And so for a lot of us, we were working together on, well, what is our reputation? How do we monetize that in a way that feels right, is aligned with purpose. 15% of my class was coming out of the military, going into either public or private sector. And so they had to figure out how to tell their story. So that's really that moment where I started to meet not only my amazing classmates, but other entrepreneurs who were starting businesses and trying to figure out how do they leverage their personal brand and reputation to launch a new venture and to pivot. And so for me, that was sort of the culmination. But I've always been a fan of, if we're watching TV, I want to watch the ads. I want to see what's their messaging. What are they saying? Who are the influencers? I mean, Thanksgiving, I went to the mall to see where are people shopping? What are they buying? What are consumers' interests? And so for me, personal brand is all about knowing your why and then knowing who's that specific audience that really needs to know you exist. Because it's not everybody in the world. It is, where's the next opportunity for you to make a big difference in the way that is meaningful for you?
I'm glad you brought that up. Most people, when you think about, I think, because I had this, even my own daughter even talked about personal branding. So, are you trying to be a social media influencer? It's like, no, nothing like that. I am looking to influence the audience that I can truly bring value to, right? What is the skill set that I have that someone
Yes,
else actually needs to get them, whether it's career development, business development? So I'm looking to influence a very small niche, more or less, around that, and to help them. As I spoke about earlier, public speaking and things like that. You're like, well, how do you? But in our world, really, what it is, how do I present myself on the digital platform? Right?
absolutely.
That's a big thing now because searching social, if you're going to hire somebody, Jen, right? You're going to hire somebody. Typically, the first thing you're going to do is look them up. I'm going to do a search in socials, kind of see, like when you're going to get on the podcast. Wow,
Absolutely.
let's look this guy up. Grant, see what's, oh, okay. Oh, wow. You know what? There's an alignment. I want to get in touch with them, right? That's how that works. But if you don't put yourself out there, I love what you said about visibility. If you're not visible to that right audience, how are you going to get hired? Who's going to do business with you if you can't tell your narrative and your story? You feel that?
Absolutely. And I think when I said earlier, personal branding is not personal bragging, I think that's what gets people stuck is they're like, no, I'm not trying to be famous or I'm not trying to brag about myself. And the reality is, we've all learned things, we've all made mistakes. And I think of personal branding as the more you share about what you've learned, that can help people, right? When I work with nonprofit leaders about personal branding, for example, they're like, oh, no, no, I need to talk about the nonprofit. And I'm like, no, you're leading a business that happens to be a nonprofit. And if you're not talking about it and building trust with your audience and with your donors, that's actually hurting the organization. So don't think about it as I'm, beating my chest and the drums of like, come support this nonprofit. Share the stories of how you help. Share the stories of where donor dollars go, right? And I think the same is true for CEOs. 40% of millennials look at a CEO's online presence, specifically LinkedIn, but also then it goes to their website, etc., to get a sense of who is this leader that I now am going to be following. That is very different than, you know, whatever generation I am. When we were growing up, I'm a proud Gen Xer, actually.
All right, good.
Um, that's very different from before, where it'd be like, oh my gosh, I got a job. I like this company. Let's go work there. Now it's also much more about the personal brand of the leader. And I love what you said about your daughter, right? I think Gen Z, I'm going to presume she's in Gen Z or later millennial,
Yeah,
because I have a 19-year-old and I hear about his perspectives on brands all the time, personal brands, company brands. And 92% of Gen Z care about authenticity and really care about people saying what something's really about. They have a 42% distrust of company brand messaging.
yeah,
So when you think about, to your point, that personal brand versus company brand, we're in a place where, although we have 5 generations more or less online, the generation a lot of people are trying to crack or to get in front of are Gen Z. And that's really tricky because they're video first. They're not in the normal, marketing platforms that people have used. They're looking at influencers. They're not necessarily looking at celebrities because, again, they want genuine, real people. And so to me, a personal brand is always about who are you really? Tell your story. I mean, even Brene Brown, right? The reason her vulnerability video went viral for TEDx is because she didn't deliver the talk she was going to deliver. She delivered the talk and then became vulnerable and shared her story. Right. And so I think the more we can just share what's going on, how we're walking through it, and it helps others, and you're building that know, like, and trust factor. To me, I think that's the secret sauce, whatever age you are, for building a presence online. You do want to plan it and you want to think about it and you want to go execute.
That's it. That's it. How do you build a process, get the program together when you're intentional about building that brand? But you said some things that I want the audience to really lean in on. First, the authenticity level of what that brand really is and the vulnerability. People want to hear if you have been on Earth more than probably 2 hours, you probably come across some resistance. You go across some things, right? We come to this world crying, kicking, screaming, that type of thing, and we kind of continue that in different ways.
Yes.
You know,
I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about.
exactly. So reality, so if it's too perfect, people are like, ah, I don't know.
Don't believe
It's
it.
not
Yeah,
perfect. It's
that's
not
right.
absolutely perfect. It's we get into the struggle. Like, what's your struggle? You had struggle, and that's why I like good stories.
Yes.
Whether the leaders is no, I didn't just jump out of bed and became the CEO of XYZ company. I went through my trials, my tribulations. I learned some things. I made mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
but I learned from those mistakes. And then I got to where I'm at now. And now I want to share that story because everybody is in a different level. They're at different points of the road. Like, oh, I think I
Absolutely.
was off track, and I find out actually I'm not on track. I'm actually kind of on track. I'm just going through this bend in the road, but I need to go off. So those authentic stories that you talk about, like you said, you love narrative, you love the story, but then you digitize it, you make it visible, and you make that reputation visible. So if I can get a sense of who you are by looking at your digital presence, your true reality, then I'm going to like you because I talk to MBA students. You talk about MBA, right? I always get in front of different college students. So at Palm Beach College, or I'm at FIU or Florida Atlantic, they bring me in, and we talk about this because I think it's very important to understand that if you only lead with let's say your education. I have an MBA, so well, yeah, well, you're competing with 6 million other people with an MBA. All right. Well, I've got this guy. I said, yeah, but you're competing with all those other people that have similar skill sets to you. What differentiates you? No one has your story. No one has
That's
your
right.
exact story. So
That's
being
right.
able to tell your story and intertwine it with all those other aspects of it makes you different when you get in front of someone that might hire you, right?
Absolutely. When I have students and clients who are like, but I'm results oriented and I'm a problem solver. And I'm like, I hope you are. Otherwise, you're parading problems and you're not getting results. So let's come up with real words that tell your real story. And I think one thing I also recommend to people, and I'd be curious your thoughts too, don't do personal branding by yourself, right? Personal branding is something where we want to go ask, even if it's our closest friends or sometimes people we don't get along with, ask them to describe you in 5 words, right? Start small. Like, don't wait for your performance management review to get feedback. Go ask people, be self aware, and think about, hey, how am I showing up? Am I exceeding expectations? Really? Am I not? Like, where can I be more of service or of value? And I think for a lot of us, that's hard, right? Being self reflective, acknowledging where we might have weak spots, that's challenging. Um, I wrote a book in 2016. Can't believe that's going to be 10 years next year, called The Intentional Entrepreneur. And so I love the word intentional. I feel like I've been using it forever. Everybody else has caught on. But It's all about how do you take your personal brand and launch a business.
Mhm.
And it's a very like it's my first book. I love it. However, my second book that I wrote came out of a political disagreement I was having with my husband, and my mom passed away. And so there were lots of difficult conversations that I had to navigate. That although I think I'm pretty good at communicating, really hard, stressful conversations like that, whether you're taking care of your parents, whether you're going through really hard things, which life is messy, like you said earlier. It is not meant to be happy every second. That would not be a true statement. And so I wrote this book called Listen. And I went out and interviewed all these people on what's the hardest conversation you've ever had.
Ah,
Right. And that book um, really captures one that we do need to listen first before anything, but it's much more of a reflection of who I am and the experiences I went through than, say, my first book, where I did real business case examples. But for me, and people are like, Jen, why did you write that book? There's lots of books on difficult conversations. And I said, yeah. And I wanted to write my experience, my perspective, my framework for how to navigate that. And if it helps 20 people or 1,000 people, I'm happy, right? Everybody can add value to a unique audience. So I think sometimes people also think that there's nothing unique about them. There's somebody just like them, right? And that's not true. Right?
true.
Based on your experiences, like you said earlier, we all bring our own expertise, knowledge, and value. And so I ask my clients when I work with them, and this may be of use to listeners, I ask them to pick three areas of expertise, strengths, different ways you want to describe it, and write those down, right? Because we cannot be good at everything. And it's just as good and important to know what you're not good at.
Mhm.
Like, I don't want to be behind a desk 24/7. That is not, especially if you make me work in Excel, right? I like collaborating with people. I like being creative and innovative. I love strategy. And so, for people to really think about when are they at their best? What are those strengths that they bring to bear? What do people come to them for advice on that really seems to work well? And couple that with, I actually have clients do a personal mission statement and we work through what's your purpose statement, right? What kind of leader are you? I'm a gutsy leader. What's the change you're trying to drive? And what are the strengths you're going to use to do that? Which are those first three I was talking about. And
Yes.
so a lot of people don't sit down and think about why am I on this earth?
Mhm.
What's my why? And really ponder that. And I think it can be really helpful when you're thinking about even if I could do 10% of that more than I am today or 20%, that's on the right path.
Mhm.
So for me, I also think personal branding, it's a long game.
Yes.
It's not a one and done post on LinkedIn, right? So if people are trying to change their personal brand or evolve it, I tend to think of it as sort of a what I call a reputation roadmap. Look out 12 to 24 months at a minimum and think about where do I want to be 12 months from now or 24 months from now? And even if you just did one thing differently each month,
Mhm.
what would that be?
Mhm.
Maybe the first month, maybe this month in December before you end the year, it's, hey, I'm going to go ask three people, what do you think about me? Where could I be better? What do you think? What am I good at? Right. But I think having that map and just keeping small baby steps, because you'll get there.
Yes.
Personal brand and building a personal brand feels overwhelming because the people who do it well, they look like they're doing it great and they just got there like in one day. And it's like, no, no, they've been building that brand for months and years. So
True.
I think it's important for people to give themselves some grace and to have that plan and just start. Even if it's, you know what, I need to recognize people or thank them because that's how I want to end the year. That's a great way to start building your personal brand, right? Write recommendations on LinkedIn, write
Yep.
thank you cards. So
Mhm.
I would just say start small, have a plan, but it's okay to take baby steps and celebrate those wins. That's how it all starts.
It's everything you said there. I want, again, the audience, you need to lean in, you need to rewind, go back, start over, and replay that. Because listen, really, literally listen to what Jen just said. And you'll come to a point in the road where certain things you can do yourself. There's a DIY approach to certain things, right? But then you'll get to that point, like, you know what, I need help. And that's when you need a professional. You're going to need somebody to truly guide you to where you want to go. That's what Jen does. That's what I do. And this is important to understand when you need that because yes, you can ask your friends and peer group to evaluate or at least give you some feedback, but they're not going to tell you. Usually, they're going to give you the raw truth. Some people might, they might.
They might.
It may be, a contentious situation. Maybe not. Maybe you said something so important, political views, right? And this is your husband, right? But they were different. So the truth, like, wow, how do we, so you got it. How do we get to the raw truth? So when you work with someone else that's not emotionally connected to you, you might get some candid feedback. But the
Mm,
other thing, to your point, Lisa, you have to do some analysis and some assessment. And what are you trying to get to? And what are the skills that you need to get there? I do a skills gap analysis with people. Now I
yes.
compare it to people that have already attained the goal that they want to get to. And that's a great thing. Like, all right, you want to go out, you want to be like in my book, you can see behind me first line. In the first line, the so there's two people. So there's the guide and the client. So the client said, hey, I want to be president. I want to be the section president in this organization. That's great. That's a great goal. Well, how are you going to get there? Right. Let's take a look at that. And let's take a look at the path forward of attaining that goal. And you understand, yeah, I can do certain things myself, but you can't do everything yourself. And you're going to find out, well, I need better. I need maybe it's situational awareness. Maybe it's emotional intelligence that you're showing that you have some deficiencies when compared to someone else that has already done that. Maybe it's educational wise. Maybe there's more experience. But then it's not so much I don't have these, like how do I go out and attain these things, right? Right? It's just like in real life. If you're going to climb that mountain and you realize, hey, I need mountain climbing boots. Well, now you have to go out and acquire those, get to that next level. Otherwise, you're gonna get stuck up there, right? So, but you need a professional. Getting back to why I'm talking like this, you're gonna need a professional to show you. So before you start to climb, I don't want to get you up and find out, hey, where are your boots? You're like, what? you know, I'm gonna be able to tell you up front that you're gonna need some mountain climbing boots. So you need to understand the skills you need to acquire and the skills that you already have. One thing that I've learned, and I love this about when I work with people, they begin to realize some skill set that they have that they didn't realize that was valuable to someone else.
Absolutely.
Right? Right? And they go through that and it's really eye opening for them. Like, wow. Or they realize, oh, I'm not that far off from this other individual or it may be that they attain their goal. Maybe I just need to apply more time. To your point, where you were saying, like, hey, it wasn't overnight, it was 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years. But are you willing to put in the work? And that's one thing I have found in our society because everything it's self gratification, immediate, uh, um, you know, uh, attainment. Like driving up to the fast food restaurant, right? Give me a number one. I just give them my money, and there I've got it. Well, it's a lot more than that. You're gonna have to put in the tough grind. You got to put in some grit. I asked my kids, so where's your grit? Like, what did you leave that at home? Because you need that.
Absolutely. Well, and I think to your point, it is it is a climb, right? And I wouldn't go run a marathon or climb a mountain without the right tools and resources. Um, and I do think, some of the tools that I use, and listeners might be familiar with these. I use the disc with my clients. I'll use strengths finders, and I'll also use Enneagram. And between those three, if I see someone's different profiles, I can pretty much tell you how they will operate and what might be their blind spots. And so I do think asking for that feedback is important. I will share, this is probably 11 years ago when I was going through the personal brand process for myself. I was driving in my car with my 8-year-old at the time. And I asked him, I said, so, hey, and I'm like patting myself on the shoulder in my mind, like, You're such a good personal brand strategist. I'm like, so hey, can you tell me three things that you like about me and three things you want me to work on? And I'm like looking in the rearview mirror at his face, and he goes, Mom, do you want me to alternate my answers? And I was like, what? I'm like, in my head, I'm like, oh my God, can I unwind asking that question? And I
Yeah.
was like, he just offered me a feedback sandwich and he's 8. And maybe I should have thought about this before I asked these questions. But I said, no, no, I would love it. Right. And so he told me, he said, Mom, I love that you're an entrepreneur. I said, oh, cool. He said, and you're stressed all the time. I said, oh, he said, you're really nice and a sweet person. And when you're stressed, you get angry sometimes and you yell. And I said, oh, okay, good to know. He said, you're a really good driver
Good.
because I talk about driving instead of yelling at people. Um, and he said, and I wished I could spend more time with you. You're not home enough. And I was like, okay. So super helpful. Definitely holy smokes moment.
Yeah.
Right. And that led me to change a lot of things, taking more time, not being so stressed, having quality time if I couldn't do the quantity time. And so, although at that moment I was like, wow, that hurt and that was helpful.
Yeah.
And, adults were all learning how to parent as we go. So, good job asking for feedback. So, yes, it can be a bit scary. However, the sooner you get the feedback, the sooner you can make improvements. And
Sure.
I do think, to your point, if you find something really easy, don't assume that everybody finds it easy, right?
Yeah.
I think chase your curiosity. So if you're curious about something, go dig into that because if you're curious, that ethic or that grit will kick in.
Mhm.
And acknowledge the things that come really easily to you that you can do differently or better than others. Um, and I think in today's world, you have a lot of people upskilling, trying
Yeah.
to figure out how do I leverage AI? What does this mean for me? And so the more you can show that you're investing in your knowledge, that you're sharing that insight, that builds a reputation in and of itself on platforms like LinkedIn, or if you decide you want to do video on TikTok or Instagram. But I do think know your audience, be really clear on what do they need to hear and how do you speak to them in their words. I think oftentimes as storytellers or in branding, we use words that we think the audience needs. That's not always the words they actually would use or want to hear. So I do think it's a lot of understanding yourself, understanding your audience, and then really defining what can I bring to bear. Lately, I've been talking a lot about leadership branding
Mhm.
because sometimes people I think say, "Oh, well, I don't need a personal brand." You have one.
Yeah.
Right. You have a personal brand already. People already have thoughts about you, whether they're good, bad, and different, doesn't matter. But I think an elevated version of personal brand is leadership brand.
Sure.
We all have the opportunity to lead by example, whether you're a CEO or fresh out of college new hire. So, what I challenge folks to think about is what's your leadership brand? How are you leading into 2026 yourself, others, but just how do you set a good example? Because I think that also builds your personal brand in ways that you may not realize. But what are people seeing you do? Do your words meet your actions? And even if you just started there, that's a great place to start thinking about, am I showing up authentically and adding value?
Wow. Wow. And it brought me back to what you just said, especially about reputation and that you have a personal brand, but are you intentional about building it and understanding how people see it? I work with clients all the time. And what I have found, especially when they're looking to either pivot or they're in their current career, they say, well, they're not utilizing all my resources. It's almost like you get in a car, get this new car, but you only, utilize 30% of what the car can actually do. Because you don't realize it. But certain people, it's the same type of thing. If you're only utilizing 30% of my capabilities, that other 70% is still there. But maybe you're just not aware of it. Your peers, your coworkers, the companies, you're not aware of it. So you're limiting your value. And I always look at the analogy, and everybody loves this one because it makes sense. And I'm date myself because I'm a little older. But some of the Gen X might know. You ever watch the movie or show? It's come on called Gilligan's Island, right? Gilligan's Island would come on. They were on this desert island, and they got stranded. So John Denver plays Gilligan. Everybody remembers Gilligan. He was so silly. He was a lovable character. However, when he tried to get other roles in Hollywood, he found
Mm,
himself to be
pigeonhole.
typeset, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And now all they could see was Gilligan. They couldn't see John Denver. And it really held him back. Think about your own self. If someone only sees you, or an organization, or even your own resume only says one thing
Hmm.
about you, and yet you have all these other things that you're good at or that you're interested in, then that's when you start saying, hey, my personal brand is really not representing who I am and what I am about. In my case, I
Absolutely.
spent 30 years business development in information technology. So my whole resume says, hey, you look at Grant McGaw, he's going to sell you some kind of
Yes.
for
Yes.
the enterprise. However, as I started building my personal brand and I started to understand more about myself as well, people said, "No, I really like the way you communicate. I like the way you speak. You have this great voice. You have this oration about you." And then it started to go in another world. But I had to get intentional about building that out. So now
Mm,
when people think about, oh, Grant McGaw, like, oh yeah, that's that guy. He has this Follow Brand podcast. He's really big in media. He knows healthcare, technology. He knows about finance. And it just expanded my whole scope. And why I say this is because now when it comes to how I am successful from as far as a monetization standpoint, I have many other revenue
mhm.
streams than I had because I was just stuck in that one world.
I love everything you just said. It reminds me of two examples. One of my friends who's a senior executive, actually at Capital One, she said one day, she's like, and she reported into the C-suite. She said, I'm going in for my performance review. And I got the feedback that I wasn't strategic enough. And she's like, Jen, literally all I do is breathe strategy. Like I am very good at strategy. And I said, well, what did you do to change people's minds? She says, you're not going to believe it. I said, let's try it. She goes, I started using the word strategy in everything I said.
Mhm.
Because here's what would happen in meetings, because she got the strategy, she would talk about the tactical implications of changing the strategy. So people around her only heard her talk about tactical things.
Yeah.
So she would say, well, hey, let's step back and think about what's the strategic implication of this? Hey, let's make sure, does this project align with our strategy? And so to me, when I think about creating a personal brand, one is words matter. People may not have the words you want them to have because they're using their own words in their head. And so, just like she had to use strategy to be perceived as strategic, do an inventory and think about what words am I using? Your example about you is great because you're building a breadcrumb trail to bring people along your personal brand journey where you started with technology and then you start adding in other breadcrumbs of personal brand and leadership and blah 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 and blah blah. And all of a sudden you end up at a place known as a personal brand thinker, right? And so, and speaker, etc. But if we don't give people the words we want them to use or to think about us in, then we definitely will have a challenge. So as people are thinking about heading into the new year, kind of do a reflection and audit of, well, what am I speaking up about in meetings? What am I asking about? What am I offering ideas on? Does that pigeonhole me like the Gilligan Island example? The other thing I would say, one of my clients right now, Madeline James, is launched in early November. It's going up against big competitors. So they have to use one influencer strategy because that is a big part of their target market. And I think something like 62% of marketing efforts in 2026 will be influencer based.
Hmm.
Like moving from traditional marketing to bringing in personal brand thought leaders. So people could even think about what's something I'm passionate about that maybe is outside of my job that I can parlay into a future career. So don't discount this idea that you can create a personal brand around something you're passionate about that lays that bridge or the foundation to go to your next opportunity. If you're in a role that you're like, no, Jen, I really don't want to stay here, that's okay. Then think about how do we build that evidence
Hmm.
of here are my skills, here's my knowledge, and here's where I'm going to go next. Because a lot of times when it comes to building our personal brand, we have to create the evidence to get us where we want to go. It is nobody else's job to build your personal brand but you.
That's
And
true.
that's painful because you're like, but wait, but that's where you can get like a little personal board of advisors. You guys can go have wine and yummy cheeses once a month and talk about, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Do you think that would work? Right. Or, for me, I was working in a role at Capital One early in my career as a product and project manager. We weren't really allowed to play on the money side, on the finance side. So I went and joined a nonprofit board
Yeah.
and then got on the finance committee so I could learn about finance, right? So to your point, what's your learning agenda for next year? What's that skill assessment? And come up with creative ways to fill that learning gap. It may not always be at the company you're at. It might be through having a mentor. It might be through taking certificate programs versus going back for a full degree. It might be, you know, joining a board or doing volunteer work. So I think we have to get creative. And sometimes if we feel like our personal brand is holding us back or we're not there, we can be stressed. And when we're stressed, your brain actually cannot innovate.
Hmm.
It is a different part of the brain or collaborate. And so for each of us, I think carve out some time where you can step back, take a deep breath, and think about what would creating evidence look like? What's missing? What do I need to create? And again, it's just one thing a month, one thing a week, whatever you have bandwidth for. Because I don't know about you, at the beginning of the year, I'll be like, I'm going to lose 40 pounds. And at the end of the year, I'm like, I still need to lose the 40 pounds. So we want to set goals that are manageable for our personal brand. Do one thing a week, one thing a month. Be real with yourself, but just start. And I think if you have a close friend or a mentor that can help you along the way and be a sounding board, they can talk with you, they can talk with me. I'm happy to chat with anybody. Um, but I think about how much individually we know. And if we shared the mistakes we've made or shared what we've learned, how
Yeah.
much we can help other people. So at
Yeah.
the end of the day, and this always people are like, what? I'm like, 90% of your personal brand has nothing to do with you.
Hmm.
It has to do with what are you providing to people that is helpful to them.
Love it.
So, anyways,
No, no, all of that, what you said is so true. And it got me to thinking right now, I'm going to make a change in how my process of doing my podcast right now, right as we record this meeting. I want to,
great time.
instead of me asking you the question, you've gone through my process, you've looked at some of my content, you've now gone through the Follow the Brand podcast interview, the whole, like we're at the end of our show right now. What question would you like to ask me?
Hmm. I would love to know what's the one thing you want to develop or learn evidence wise for you going into 2026? Like, what's on your learning agenda for you to stay relevant, to continue to add value, and to elevate your own personal brand?
That's a Thank you for asking that because yeah, I
Happy
do.
holidays.
Got a lot of things. And people ask me that because you asked me that earlier. Where are you at, Grant? Where are you in Omaha? Wow. The Midwest. And then you're doing these things in St. Croix. You do these things. How do you tie all that together? And because I'm now in enterprise, right? I have an ecosystem. So in Miami, I built my personal brand. I built the Follow the Brand podcast ecosystem, right? It's a lot of that there. And then in St. Croix, I built out a financial marketplace, right? And
Mm.
that's where, like, I have a show called The Big Picture. And in The Big Picture, We talk about finance and that type of thing, and we're developing a lot of different opportunities in St. Croix. Then in Omaha, it's like, well, what can I do? I haven't been there in 30 years. I've got to be able to do something. I'm going to be more or less headquartered there. What is that going to look like? And what I noticed was, because I have such expertise in artificial intelligence, but how do you apply it? I'm into applied knowledge. So
Mm.
how do I apply AI in business development? How do I apply AI in personal development, personal branding? So I built out a AI business accelerator. It's going to be a business
Oh.
accelerator program. It's going to be launched as a cohort. And I was able to get it integrated with the city of Omaha. They want to roll this out to all their business because this is still new, right?
Mm.
New herb, meaning there's acquired skill set around it, but people are kind of like doing their own thing. There are different levels. Well, how do we really apply this to, first of all, develop our sales programs, our marketing programs, especially small business? You're an entrepreneur. And I want to say one thing because I answered your question. I want to say it because you said something. I want people to understand this. You really need to get on top of this. All of us are entrepreneurs. You have a business contract with your company, your enterprise. That's a business contract. Ask any HR professional, will tell you, like, yeah, you have a contract with us, meaning, and when you are an entrepreneur, you have contracts with your clients. It's a contract. So you have a contract of service. So who in an entrepreneurial world is responsible for promoting your brand? Well, you are. You're
Mm-hmm.
absolutely responsible for promoting your brand, whether you're going through career development, business development. You are the brand, right? No matter how you want to look at it. But if you sit on that brand, you don't develop it and you don't take it to the next level, what happens is, especially, and I tell people, I'm at the other side. I'm like 62 years old now, right? If I didn't start developing my brand, at the end of the day, where I'm no longer that valuable as in business development, in technology, I start taking more of a back seat. But still, I have expenses, I have bills, I have other things. Like, well, I've got to now develop this new revenue stream. I can't just sit back and expect things to just be how they were. So you're developing these new revenue streams. You've got to start thinking, and I think it's a mind shift
Mm-hmm.
takes place, that you are in the business of developing your brand, developing your business at all times. You are an entrepreneur, whether you think about it or not, or a business owner, you own your career, right?
Yes.
Any point in time, what do they tell you when you sign that contract? This is an what do they call that? At risk
That
or
will.
at will. At will. At any point in
Yep.
time, I can say your
Yeah.
service is no longer needed. You got to think about that, right? Right. So,
Absolutely. I mean, I'm in the DC market. I have people reach out to me often who were federal government employees, seniors in the federal government, senior levels. And, you know, my answer is always, of course, I'll help. And we need to build our brand before we need it, right? Even if you're coming out of college, interview people at your company, learn about the culture, write about what it's like to start in a new company, write about what's exciting. Don't write about the bad stuff because that will get you in trouble. Write about here's what I'm learning, here's what's super cool and exciting. Because you can build a brand at any point, and you should. I mean, in my corporate career for 10 years, the one thing I really didn't do was build my brand outside of the company because I was working, 60 to 80 hours a week, being a great employee, getting great results for the company. And yet, I did not have a personal brand outside of the company. So when I started my business, I leveraged my brand within the company, but then I had to go build my brand. I had to network and be a part of groups. So one other sort of easy task that makes it sound mean, one idea for 2026 is to look at your networks. I love that you like frameworks. I have so many that I could have shared, but I'm like, no, let's not overwhelm people. I have 4 networks, and every year I reassess them. I have a network of my peers. Who are peers like me that I want to build relationships with? I have networks where I could find my clients, CEOs, startups, etc. I have a network for giving back. So I'm part of a women's giving circle, which is a great way to meet a lot of people that aren't in the typical networks I would find because it's a very diverse group of people. And then I have a network for fun,
mhm.
right? And the reason I say that is because It's good to have fun. For me, giving back is important, and it might be for people listening, right? We can all figure out how we want to do that. But I think a network of your peers and of your future clients or prospects is important. So you can stay in touch with what's the most forward thinking happening in my space, and what do my people need? What do my clients need or prospects need? And so if you haven't ever thought about networking so far, and now you're thinking about 2026, how do I increase visibility?
Mhm.
Go visit different groups, right? Go check it out, try it out, see what feels like a good fit. And then I invest in it for the year. And then next year I'll see, are these still the right networks for me? But I think you don't want to be out of sight, out of mind. And you absolutely want to start building your brand. Even if it's just known as someone who um, is kind, does recognition. That's a great start. But you also want to share, even if it's, hey, I read this great article on AI and blah, 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 because you want to transition at some point into using AI.
Yeah.
Great. Put that on LinkedIn, share it in a team meeting, right? Like find the places where you can use your words to define your brand.
Man, well said, well stated. I want to thank you again, Jen, for being on the show. You're going to end 2025 in such a great way and begin 2026 with a plan, which is always good, and how you're going to implement that plan, but stick to it. Because at the end of the day, just like anything else, I think nature teaches this, and when you make that, you plant your seed, then you nurture it over time, but then you see it grow, it breaks ground, and then you have a harvest. So that's a process that we all have to go through so you can harvest your personal brand and make it very, very good. I want to thank you again for being on the show, The Brand Mirror. I want you to tell us how to contact you, right? And make sure we get in touch with you, especially in that DC world.
I would love for people to visit my website, brandmirror.com. Feel free, please connect with me on LinkedIn. Practice reaching out and connecting with someone if that's new to you. I will accept. I'm happy to do complimentary consults. If you just want to hop on a call and brainstorm some stuff, please reach out. That is a genuine offer. People ask me, like, really? I'm like, yeah, because this is what I love to do.
Yeah.
So if you feel like you're stuck or you need some help, please reach out. Otherwise, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook and all of that good stuff.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you again for being on the show. I want to encourage your entire audience to see all the episodes of Follow the Brand at 5 Star Medium. That is the number five. That is star STR. B for brand, D for development, and for masters.com. You are going to be able, especially if you're interested in personal branding, there's 50 episodes right there so you can learn about these things. Get a good feel for it. So when you engage with Jen, you're going to already be at a higher level and you can really take off. So thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you so much. This was so lovely. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.